Well, thank you very much indeed, and welcome everyone. And I should start by saying that it is not easy to fill a hall this big on the hottest day of the year in the summer, when we've actually got clear blue skies and the hall has no air conditioning. But if anyone could do it, it is the amazing Michael Lewis.
Thank you.
And I think most of you already know his backstory about how he started off on Wall Street, then became a writer, started with the amazing book Liar's Poker. Hands up who's read Liar's Poker. Ha! Okay, you are surrounded by fans, so they know your story. Okay, hands up who read The Big Short. Okay, hands up who read The Fifth Risk. Okay, not quite as many, but still a lot of you. I happen to think it's one of, if not the best books he's written, but one of the most important. But he's here tonight to talk about what is essentially the sequel to The Fifth Risk. The Fifth Risk, as you may remember, was all about the incredible work that America's largely unseen group of civil servants do to keep us safe, and to essentially fight for the country and for democracy and, in many cases, a better world. And the degree to which they are not recognized, not loved, not appreciated, and that was even before Doge, but absolutely crucial. And this book we're going to be talking about tonight, Who is Government, is really in some ways a sequel to that book, because he has taken the topic, which in many ways is deeply unfashionable in America today and is hated by Donald Trump and Elon Musk and many others in the administration now, which is a question of what are government civil servants actually doing, why should we care, and should we give them respect and love? So compared to the kind of glamorous world of sports and Wall Street, this is kind of an odd topic to choose. What made you go back into it again?
Can I have 10 minutes?
Absolutely.
I'm going to need 10 minutes.
Okay.
So you promise not to interrupt?
Okay. I'll try. I'm not going to promise anything.
Okay. I need to monologue a bit on this.
Okay.
So there is a backstory, and it's really the story of my sense that I'd failed when I did The Fifth Risk. So The Fifth Risk starts as pure literary opportunism. It's funny that you say it is a seemingly unfashionable topic, the American government. It's seemingly hard to make swing on the page, but thank God for Donald Trump. He electrified the material. When he came to office the first time, the day after he was elected, he fired his entire transition team. And
that was just in 2016 without even Elon Musk.
But it was the bizarre. This is what got me interested in the subject in the first place. That I learned then that the Obama administration had deputized 1,000 people over 6 months to prepare what was probably the best course ever created on how the government works. And not just the White House, but across the executive branch. And Donald Trump's people, Chris Christie, had assembled a team of 550 people to go in the day after the election. And instead, the day after the election, Donald Trump fired them all and told Chris Christie, you and I are so smart. This is directly from Christie. He said, you and I are so smart, we can go in and figure out how the government works in an hour. And I thought, my God, it's like this is made to order material, that I can wander around the government, get the briefings that the Trump administration have not bothered to get, know more about how the government works than the president of the United States, and the reader will be along for that ride. So the structure of that book is more like a travel book inside some of the more obscure agencies in the federal government, and sort of demonstrated that even no matter where you went in the federal government, there was some portfolio of risks being managed that if they weren't managed well, it was terrifying.
Yeah, and these are like nuclear risks, pandemic risks, environmental risks, and this was even before COVID.
Food safety risks. I mean, yeah, even before COVID. So at the end of that, I realized as I was doing it that I'd gone in with the assumption that the actual people who were working in the government couldn't carry a story, that I was carrying the story. And I was sort of cutting off and choking off the characters. I bounced very quickly. I didn't give any of them kind of room to breathe. But the truth was, the most shocking thing, it just took me a while for my eyes to open to it, about the experience of going in the government was the quality of the people who were there. And and not just like, oh, they're smart, and oh, they're dealing with important problems, but actually interesting characters. They didn't know they were interesting, but they were interesting. And so what happens is, a year after The Fifth Risk comes out, the paperback comes out, and I'm required to glue something in the back of the paperback so that it's got new stuff in it. And I thought, let's go give this a shot. Let's go take one of these people. And it's happened to coincide with the last government shutdown. 2018, 2019, for many weeks, Trump shut down the government, sent home 2/3 of the 2 million person workforce by declaring them inessential workers and not paying them. Now, that already tells you we have a problem. Like, what organization is going to run well if you do that to the employees? But I got a list of inessential workers who'd been sent home. It wasn't a complete list, but it was a list of thousands of names. And I just thought, like, how am I going to do this? I didn't want to really cherry pick. I just picked, I said it was alphabetized. I just picked the first name on the list. And his name was Arthur A. Allen. and Arthur A. Allen, I got to tell you the story of Arthur A. Allen.
You just called him up, did you? He must have been shocked.
I just called him out of the blue. And
how did he respond?
Well, let me tell you, don't interrupt. Don't interrupt. So this is what leads to this book. So I call Arthur A. Allen. It turns out he is the lone oceanographer in the Coast Guard Search and Rescue Division. The Coast Guard Search and Rescue Division is an important little piece of the American government. As Art A. Allen said to me, he said, Americans have an unbelievable ability to get lost at sea. That, like, we just like do it better than anybody. We're rich morons who get on our boats and don't pay attention to the weather, and the Coast Guard has to come get us. He'd been in this job for 3 decades. So I call him up. He says, sure, you can come and I'll explain to you what I do. I live in California, he's in Connecticut, so I fly across country. He explains to me basically, in very modest terms, that what he'd done with his career, done a lot of things, but the highlight was he'd basically invented a science. And the science was the science of how objects drift at sea. And it was a problem the Coast Guard should have been sensitive to even before he showed up, because when you're looking for people who are lost at sea, even if you know where they came to grief, if they've been at sea for just a little bit, the way they drift in the water turns on whether they're on the object they're on, whether it's a raft or if they're just a body with a life jacket or if it's an upside down sailboat. And so people were just not getting rescued because the Coast Guard didn't know where to look, because they didn't know how this thing drifted. And Art Allen had discovered this problem a few years after he'd gotten on the job. He'd gone out to the Chesapeake Bay, where the Coast Guard has a rescue station, just to watch the way the actual rescuers sort of function. It was a clear, sunny day, a summer day. They weren't expecting any problems. A storm comes out of nowhere, a squall, and boats are all of a sudden capsizing across the Chesapeake. The Coast Guard's rescuing people across the bay. And at the end of the day, he's watching this. He sees that there's one boat that still hasn't been found. And on this boat, they're 2 older, very overweight people, which turns out to be a huge advantage of survival if you're in the water. And no, you want to be fat if you're lost at sea. You float like a cork,
and you probably stay warmer.
You're like a seal. You know,
yeah.
and so there were.
Again, if you want to go to get an ice cream afterwards, just remember that.
No. So there was a woman who was the same age as Art Allen's wife. And a little girl, 12-year-old girl, was the same age as Art Allen's daughter. And he watched as they frantically searched through the night for what they assumed rightly was an overturned sailboat. They knew where they'd started. They knew where they'd come to grief because they knew roughly because of when the squall had kicked up. But they didn't know how an overturned sailboat drifted. They didn't find these people until the next morning, and the mother and the little girl were dead. And so I'm in Art Allen's living room, our kitchen, when he tells me this story. And it's someone I've met, 12 hours before. I end up spending 3 days with him. And he's telling me this story, and he starts to cry. And he walks over to his bookshelf and pulls this yellowing newspaper article from between two books. And it's the article about the death of this mother and her child. And he said, that could have been my wife, that could have been my child. And I decided then that I was going to not let people die this way ever. I was going to figure out how objects drift. So he begins over a period of a decade tossing different objects into the Long Island Sound and measuring how they drift. And everything from like a fat guy to a skinny person in a life preserver, to someone on a raft, and in the end he has 100 objects classified. He reduces their drift patterns to math, puts the math in the Coast Guard's search and rescue division's software, and we're now in 2007. 1 week after he did this, a 300-pound man fell off the side of a Carnival cruise ship 70 miles east of Miami in the dead of night. They don't find he's gone for several hours, but they have cameras on the side of the ship, so they can go back and see where he went off. But then the question is how does that fat man drift? Well, Art has figured this out. 5 hours later, the Coast Guard lands right on top of this guy.
Wow.
In all of human history, that person is dead. You don't find people who are just floating in the ocean. They find him, and there are newspaper articles about it at the time. You can go look them up, and it's the miracle of the rescue at sea. And all the articles about the guys coming out of the chopper, the heroes who lift him out, no one asks, how did they know where to look? And let me just say, it was funny because I went and actually found another fat man who had fallen off another boat, who had been rescued. This is for my podcast later, but who had fallen off a boat in the Pacific Ocean, and who had been rescued in a similar way. And I called him. I couldn't find the first guy, so I had to go find another guy, and who had been rescued because of Art Allen's work. And I asked him, why do you think you're alive? And he said, I know why I'm alive. He said, when I fell off, I was floating in the water. I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And I said, no, Art Allen is your Lord and Savior. Art Allen is the reason you're alive. And no one had told him. No one explained it. So this knowledge gets created by this guy. It's transformative. Thousands of people, not just in our country, we shared the knowledge with other countries, are alive today because of this man's work. So the material, I knew it would write itself when I got back to my desk. He was a great character, kind of very recessive, didn't want to talk about himself, but obsessed with the drift of objects, devoted his career to this narrow thing. It was incredibly important. But when I realized, what a great sort of character and situation I had, I was going back to the airport after spending 3 days with him. And I interviewed his wife, his children, gone to his office, gone and thrown things in the Long Island Sound with him, just asked him every question you could possibly ask him. And I'm on the way back to the airport, and my phone rings. And it's Art. And he says, hey, you're a writer. And I said, yeah, I'm a writer. I'm sure I must have said that when I called you. He says, my son just told me that, you write books, and the books get turned into movies. And he said, you're going to write about this? And I said, yeah, Art, why do you think I flew 3,000 miles across country and just spent 3 days asking you about your life? And he said, I just thought you were really interested in how objects drift. and this is your civil servant, your government expert. Think about that. He was willing to spend 3 days with a total stranger without any interest. It wasn't there's going to be a story about me. He was shocked when I wrote about him, just shocked. And he could only get away with it because he'd been furloughed and there was no phalanx of communications officers between him and me. So I thought then, I wrote it up. I loved the story. And I thought, I should have done this all along. I should have focused more on the people. And I put that to one side, went and wrote a book about Sam Bankman-Fried, went to the podcast seasons, all the rest. And this, what's at the bottom of this is there's this stereotype of the government employee, the civil servant. It is so radically different from what I collided with every time I went into an actual government office, a federal office. There was a job to be done exploding the stereotype. The fifth risk didn't do it all by itself. I thought if the opportunity, time, a place to do it comes available, go do that again. But I also thought, don't let it be just me. Because if it's just me writing it, all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's Michael Lewis's story. Mm-hmm. Get some other writers, parachute them in, say, just go find a story. Very different writers. So I found 6 writers I really love, mostly novelists. I mean, they were kind of novelist type. Yeah. One Englishman, John Lanchester, and said, we got the money from Jeff Bezos, back when Jeff Bezos
was trying to care about government.
And got the Washington Post to commission this thing. And everybody just wrote what they wrote. And it was really a quixotic enterprise for a newspaper. I mean, that first piece I wrote in there is 13,000 words. It's about coal mining. And the thing just exploded. Once again, the fifth risk did this too, like surprise seller. There was this hunger in the American population to understand what the hell their government did. And there was, the stories just didn't, like, the normal good story just didn't get told. So anyway, so that was you. Now I'm done. Okay.
Well, no, there's.
By the way, you are the most glamorous looking interviewer I've ever had. The hair blowing in the wind.
That's cool.
I feel like we're on the
trying to do an interview without air conditioning in a place with lots of fans. There we go.
It looks like you look like you're on the prow of a ship, preparing to fall off.
I know. I don't know what happened if I'd fall overboard. I would drift. But anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, flattery is not going to get you an easy ride. So, the question I'd love to ask you though is. You then you collected this group of people to write this book, and that was before Doge, wasn't it?
Yep, we started it. What is it? June? We started a year ago. I mean, the first pieces started to get written a year ago. So it was all before Doge. The last piece in the book, I wrote about a third of the book. The first long piece and the very last long piece, and my pieces were just longer. I do go on, but the last piece was written. I finished in January, so that's still before Doge.
Did you expect Elon Musk to come in and do Doge?
No. I didn't think it was in anybody's. I didn't think Trump cared enough about the government to let him loose in it. And Trump cared about narrow slices of the government that got in his way or might put him in jail, but he didn't care about the agriculture department. And I was surprised he was willing to do it, because what he has done is, in the name of efficiency and cost savings, they've not introduced any of that. There's been almost no cost savings. In fact, when you add in the lost revenues from what they've done to the Internal Revenue Service, probably just net loss. But in the name of, seeking out waste, fraud, and abuse, what they have done is increased slightly, and some cases more than slightly, the risks of lots of bad things happening. One simple example, this was 6 weeks ago, a bunch of people were killed in Kentucky by a tornado. And it was like, they're kind of buried in the newspaper. But it emerges that the tornado warning people who might have warned them had been laid off by Doge. It's a little example of another thing about it is like, Elon Musk went through the government and lit a bunch of fuses, and on the other end of the fuses are bombs, and it's just a question of how long the fuse is before it gets to the bomb. So that's not really. It's funny thing to kind of get at.
No, it's terrifying.
What is there? It's sort of like, what interest were they serving? I think it's not a simple story. The simple story is Donald Trump. It is true. Donald Trump wanted to subordinate the entire civil service to his own personal needs. That's true. But there's an awful lot of the civil service that doesn't conflict with him in any way, that got disrupted in ways that might come back to haunt him. So not clear that worked out. Elon Musk, what does he want? The simple story is he wants to gut the regulators who regulate his businesses. It's probably true that he went after that, but he did a whole bunch of other stuff that caused a lot of people to hate him and torpedo the value of his assets. I mean, it's not clear it was in his interest. The only person there's a kind of a triumvirate of people who are who were behind the Doge, behind this movement, were the authors of the Project 2025 book, is a fellow named Russell Vought, who lays very low and is the only one who actually knows how the government works. Trump doesn't, Elon Musk doesn't. Russell Vought is now the head of the Office of the Management of Budget. And he is a libertarian who thinks that there basically shouldn't be government. And he is seeing his dream realized. That makes some sense.
Have you ever met him?
I'm going to try. I haven't done it yet.
Have you met Elon Musk and asked him about this?
I've not met any of these three. I've tried. I sent Elon Musk some emails. He doesn't. I'm going back in. I'm not done. And I wanted Elon Musk to just explain to me why he thought this was smart. I mean, it was just so obvious to anybody who had been inside these places that, sure, there's plenty of need for reform. The people inside could tell you what they need to do. It's not what they did. One little example. When they went in to fire people, they realized when they got there that the civil service has all these protections. So it's very hard to fire someone who's been there a couple of years. And there are plenty of people in the government who've been there a long time who probably should be fired. They're so hard to fire that they're like, each agency has like a broken toy department. And they just put these people there rather than fire them because there's more trouble. And it is a little wasteful. It's not the majority, but it's a few people. And they couldn't fire those people. So what they did is they fired the people who you could fire, which were the so-called probationary workers. And these are people who've been on the job for like 18 months.
Young kids.
Now, who is that? Those are young people who are coming into government, which we desperately need. And these are experts who were brought in for some pressing current problem. So it's like exactly the people you don't want to fire. So that sort of thing has repeated itself over and over.
Right.
But that wasn't, to back away from this, it really is true. And I don't think either the fifth risk or this would have worked if my main motivation was to undermine Donald Trump or to make an argument about Doge or to make a political point. I keep saying this and people don't believe me. The literary material inside the government is unbelievable. The quality of the characters.
Yeah, I mean, you referred to it as being a bit like a gold mine or some kind of, iron ore mine full of nuggets, which no one's ever bothered to go into because most writers, most policymakers, most journalists just think government is so darn boring. I mean, that's how it's perceived in America.
It's true, and it's also the way we're structured in America. The government's run not by the permanent civil service, but by 4,000 plus political appointees.
Who they kept saying to you, explain in the book, that people wanted to have you talk to the political appointees, not the actual civil service.
Yes, they won't let you get to the government. And so there's some natural resistance. The government, the actual government, has real trouble telling its story. The only time its story gets told is when it screws up. And then people get hauled before. It's learned reflexively. People who work in government have learned it's not a good thing if a journalist turns up. And so there are all kinds of barriers to getting the story, which is also another reason why I wanted kind of unusual people going in, people who would kind of come at it from weird angles. But that was the hardest part of doing the story, was getting to the people, because they didn't want you to.
So what happened to your characters as a result of Doge from either the fifth risk or from this book? Are any of them?
I feel I should tell.
Are many of them still working there, or have they all been laid off?
They've all been disabled.
They've all been laid off.
They're not either.
Is disabled now the right term for being fired?
No, either laid off or, one character in there is a guy who works in the IRS. So Geraldine Brooks. How people found their stories was great. Geraldine Brooks, wonderful novelist, got furious with Dave Eggers, other wonderful novelist who's got a piece in here, because Dave Eggers decided he wanted to write about NASA's search for life in outer space, which is like such low-hanging fruit. You don't need Dave Eggers' talent to write about that. And Geraldine said it's a waste of Dave to be writing about that. He should be writing about something harder. So I'm going to write about something even harder, as hard as you can get. I'm going to go find something useful inside the Internal Revenue Service. And she quickly found this guy who's like, he was a marshal. He was a superhero kind of character, black belt in jiu-jitsu, who ran the cyber crimes division inside the IRS, and who had busted up child sex trafficking rings, collected billions of dollars of criminals' money for the U.S. government. This is an example. This guy, who is nothing but a profit center for the government, he's still in his job, but like half his unit has been fired and he can't do his job. That kind of thing has happened with all the characters in the book.
Well, that is just absolutely tragic for the characters and for the teams and for America in every sense. But I'm curious, do you ever think that as you were going around talking, looking at the government, did you ever think that maybe Elon Musk has a point, that there is a lot of waste that needs to be cut out of the government?
So, this was all written before Elon Musk gets involved.
Yeah.
It isn't that the government doesn't need fixing. It isn't that the system is well designed. Just for a start, having new bosses brought in every 2 years above you who don't know the organization is idiotic. Having it really hard to fire people and hire people, people being promoted based on tenure rather than performance, an inability to pay people what their free market equivalents would get paid. I mean, there are all kinds of problems, and a huge underinvestment in technology. I mean, there are all kinds of problems. He didn't address any of the problems. I mean, one way to think about it is, and one point the book sort of makes, it does make, but just through story though, not through argument, is that the people aren't the problem. The process is the problem. You should be attacking the process. You shouldn't be attacking the people. He went in and attacked the people and left the process untouched.
Yeah.
And so it isn't that there isn't stuff to do. It's just not what he did. But I don't want to get too far away from the stories because I feel like I should introduce at least one of the characters of the book.
Well, you do talk, the stories are fantastic. I mean, I've just got a couple of quick questions I'd like to ask you before we go into the stories, because the stories are amazing. But why do you think Americans don't value the government? And I ask that because I'm both British and American.
Yep.
And what I do, my sort of day job these days is I oversee King's College, Cambridge.
Yep.
But I've done a lot of work in America on American campuses.
Yep.
And if you go to a campus in America with students, and at an Ivy League in particular, and say, hands up, who wants to go and work in the government?
Right.
You might get one hand.
Yep.
Certainly when I talk to students in Cambridge and say, what do you plan to do next? A big chunk of them are applying to the civil service. And there's a real difference in attitudes. Why do Americans hate government so much? Why are they so down on bureaucrats?
I don't think it was ever thus, exactly. I mean, one thing that's happened is a huge gap has opened up between what you can earn going right into the private sector and what you earn in the government for young people. I mean, the whole Wall Street phenomenon, Wall Street and tech sector, has radically changed the prospects of a 22-year-old coming out of college. So the opportunity costs of going to work for government has gone through the roof. That's one thing. The second thing is the government has not been made a fun place to work. You know, that it's not, if you are, you know, what attracts people is the importance of the jobs. It's very hard for a young person to see through the noise around the government to the importance of the jobs. Your question was, why do Americans hate their government? I mean, why do you think Americans hate their government? You probably have more of a view on this than I do.
I think I would agree with it, that it's basically too opaque. People can't understand what they're doing. And
it's too complicated.
Yeah,
it's a very complicated society.
Because, the reason I'm asking is how do you change that? Because this book is fantastic. I mean, and the reason I ask that is because I knew Paul Volcker well. And shortly before he died, he sort of summoned me and told me that one of the great regrets of his life was that he, of course, was a great public servant, that he had tried to create an institute in Harvard, which wouldn't so much be the Harvard Kennedy School, but be basically a place to train civil servants. And he was determined to do it, and he could not get the philanthropists initially to back it, because such was the antipathy towards government. So I'm kind of, curious, what can you change? I mean, this book is certainly going to contribute to try and tell their stories. Maybe you're going to make a movie. Will you make a movie out of any of this?
I mean, there is movie interest in that first story.
Right.
The first story in the book. I mean, it's so I don't have a good answer. It's an odd feature of American democracy that the people regard their own government as the enemy, and it's a sales pitch. The government is the enemy that the Republican Party has been making for the better part of 50 years. The Democrats have never offered a full-throated defense.
No, the Democrats are kind of embarrassed about government.
One crude answer is this giant, complicated enterprise is always, and what is it? It's an enterprise where all the hard problems come to rest. All the problems that people aren't paid to solve, that need to be solved, end up in the government. So it's going to be messy. It's so easy to find negative stories and characterize the government as wasteful, inefficient, etc. It is so much harder to tell these kind of stories. So the bad stories get told over and over and over. It's sort of in no one's interest except the civil service to tell the story. The civil service is not allowed to tell its story. I mean, there's something going on there. There's something going on with the incentives of the political class. They can beat up on the government and look like they're doing things for the people, when in fact what they're doing is sort of undermining the integrity of the society. But I don't have a good answer. I mean, I do think. I mean, this is why these writers are all excited to do it. They saw that there's like a need to tell the story because the whole population needs a civics education, and we're lost if we don't come around to realizing the importance of the institution.
Well, if you get a movie made out of this book, then it will certainly help a lot. Which character would you like to make a movie about?
Well, let me just tell a story that the first. So I get these writers. It's Dave Eggers and Kamau Bell and Casey Sepp and Geraldine Brooks and John Lanchester and Sarah Vowell. I get them out there, and they all find stories in a hot minute. It was not hard for them to find material. We could have done 5 of these, and with equally good material. And then I realized, oh shit, I've got to write something. What am I going to do? So there's this.
So what, you reached out and pulled them all together and had
and I got them all
kind of
going on there, and I would serve as a sounding board for what they were thinking about writing, made sure there was no overlap, but then just sent them on their way.
And what do you tell them? You're going to write a blockbuster about the bureaucrats?
I said, just find a story.
Right.
You can go find a story. What agency interests you?
Did any of them go, boring?
No. They all went. We had some access to the heads of agencies, and they went and visit. They would go visit with somebody and say, show me around, and instantly found something. So the guy who I think is the movie, if there is a movie, is the guy I found for the first story, and it was a list. One of the most important nonprofits no one knows about is this nonprofit in Washington called the Partnership for Public Service, devoted, and was until Trump came along, bipartisan, to trying to make the federal government work better. And they quixotically have set out to sort of glorify bureaucrats. They have an award ceremony every year that they style as the Oscars of public service, called the Sammys. They are the opposite of the Oscars. It's like nobody who's on stage wants to be on stage, and everything they do is actually important.
You say that for years people wouldn't even volunteer for it.
Yeah, no. When they created the Sammys, they couldn't get anybody to nominate anybody else because they were so not me, not me. We aren't worthy kind of thing, and. But that's changed, and over the last 20 years, there have been thousands and thousands of these nominees. So I called them up, and I just said, give me a list of this year's nominees. And it was 600 or something. It was a lot of people. And again, I was faced with a list. How do I pick something off this list? And it was all impersonal. It was all like, Joe Smith works for the FBI and brought down an organized crime ring, but nothing about Joe Smith. And I'm going through this list looking for something to grab onto. And I get to Christopher Marks. solve the problem of coal mine roofs falling in on the heads of coal miners, which has killed 50,000 American coal miners in the last century. 50,000. But then it says, a former coal miner. And a movie, it popped into my, I mean, it was like, all of us, I thought that this guy, there was who single-handedly solves this sort of problem, who's a former coal miner. I imagined he grew up in West Virginia. I imagined he had some personal stake in this. His brother died or whatever. And that there would be some backstory to this. So I call him out of the blue, cold call him. Unlike Arthur A. Allen, he knows who I am. He's read Moneyball. He's actually used Moneyball in his work, which ends up being kind of interesting. But I said, look, I'm just curious, like, who you are and why you did what you did. And he says, I grew up in Princeton, New Jersey, and my dad was a professor at the university. My heart just sank. My movie just vanished. But in the next 20 minutes, he told me the following. He said, you want to know about me, you need to know a little bit about my dad. Because my dad is who I rebelled against. The reason I ended up doing what I was doing was in reaction to my dad. He says his dad turns out to was a little bit of a famous guy. He was an engineer who Princeton had named Robert Marks, who Princeton had brought in the late 60s, early 70s, because he had developed a technique to test objects that are going to be subject to stress to see if they could withstand the stress. And so he'd been used by the Air Force to test designs of fighter planes. Princeton brought him in to test designs of little nuclear reactors they were building to make sure they wouldn't crack. Robert Marks ends up being famous because he's teaching a class to Princeton undergraduates in the engineering school. And there's a kid who's in the class who comes from an art history department and says, I just came from a class on the Gothic cathedrals, and no one understands why they don't fall, why they don't collapse. No one understands how they were built. Could you use it to analyze your methods to analyze the stresses in Gothic cathedrals? And he says, yeah, and he proceeds to do it. And he's the guy who has explained to us, no one knew, which part of those cathedrals are ornamental, which part are actually structural, where they were likely weak, why when they have collapsed, became the world's authority on the subject. Chris Mark, his son, grew up in the late 60s, early 70s. Vietnam War is raging. By the time he's 13, he's throwing around words like bourgeois in the family house, and he's thinking his father is a sellout. And he announces to his father when he gets out of high school that he's not going to go to Harvard, where he's been accepted. Instead, he's going to go join the working class. and they fracture, they split. The father's furious with him. And Chris goes off and works in an auto factory, in a UPS warehouse, and he's with several other young radicals, and ends up finally in a coal mine in West Virginia. He's telling me all this on the phone, like a half-hour conversation, explaining how he got to this job. And he says, I got to this coal mine, and the other young radicals, the minute they were in, they fled. It was too scary. But something about it appealed to me. I was interested in it. And so I stayed. But a year into the job, he'd almost been killed twice. He'd watched other miners be killed. He saw this problem that hadn't been solved, how unstable the roofs were. And he left the mine, went and got a PhD, undergraduate and a PhD at Penn State in rock engineering, and started to attack the problem. The story in here is there's a whole technical story that I find absolutely riveting. That's sort of like Art Allen's technical story of how objects drift.
It's great. It's a great.
It's amazing that what this man discovered. And there are many steps to solving the problem. But at the end, and we got into that later, I went and spent days with him driving around West Virginia, looking at coal mines, having him teach me about coal mining. In this first conversation, a penny drops for me. I say, oh, so you rebelled against your dad and you ended up just having his career underground. He figured out what kept the roofs of Gothic cathedrals from falling, and you figured out what kept the roofs from coal mines from falling. And he gets pissed on the phone. He goes, what I did had nothing to do with my dad's work. Nothing at all. Nothing at all.
It all comes down to daddy issues.
And at that point, I went, yes. It was like, this is a story. Like, I've got a character who doesn't fully understand his own motivation. And this is the wonderful moment. He denies this. He fights this interpretation that there's anything even rhyming about him and his dad. We're in the car driving through West Virginia, and he just lets drop. My dad and I later reconciled. His dad's now dead. He said, and we eventually even did a piece of work together. Oh. In 2000, the year 2000, the National Cathedral in Washington looked like it might collapse. One of the towers was subsiding faster than the other, and no one could figure out what was wrong with it. And it would be a big deal if it collapsed. It's a big thing. The federal government, turned to Chris Marks' dad, Robert Marks, to figure out where the stresses were in the building. So the dad goes to the National Cathedral and starts to do his stuff, and realizes that the problem isn't in the building, it's in the foundation. That the thing was built over 100 years. The foundation that was laid was less ambitious than what architects later designed. So he has to call his son to figure out the stresses underground. And together, they figure out what's holding the National Cathedral up and whether it's going to collapse. And they write a paper about it. And I turned to him and I said, you have no idea how good this is. Like, there is a story about, there's a point to this. It isn't just that, so it was a deep emotional story. Yeah. There was a deep reason about this man's career. It's true of every character in that book. And there's a reason why Chris Mark isn't making millions of dollars in the private sector. He's decided to go do this instead. Mm-hmm. And why he's given back to his society, and why, right. And and if you can get at those emotions, the piece starts to sing.
How different was it writing these kind of stories about these incredibly, in many ways selfless people trying to do good, compared to something like writing Sam Bankman-Fried's story?
It's all kind of the same.
It's all the same?
It's all the same in that my job is to get inside them. My job is to get to know them. My job is to hang out as long as
Which one did you prefer?
Which people?
Yes.
Chris Mark is obvious, and Arthur Allen are obviously much less objectionable than Sam Bankman-Fried. Sam Bankman-Fried is more complicated. Sam Bankman-Fried can sustain a whole book. I don't know if I could write a whole book about Art Allen or Chris Mark. So if you just said which character, if I could only have one character as a character, Sam Bankman-Fried. He takes you lots of places. The thing that I loved about Sam Bankman-Fried as a character when I met him was it took me a week to figure out that I didn't know what the story was. I didn't know there was a book in it. But I did know that if there was a book in it, it would take you into this weird world of effective altruism. It would take you into Jane Street and high-frequency trading. It would take you into crypto, and it would take you into money in American politics, because he was tossing around all this money in politics, plus some other things. And so that he was a mechanism for getting at stuff in a way that with Chris Mark, I can get it.
Right.
Coal mine roofs.
Right.
So
we're getting already, I'm going to come to the audience for questions in a few moments in the hall, but before I do, I can see we're getting some online questions already, and one of them is actually already about Sam Bankman-Fried, so I'll ask it now because it's so related, which is the question is, do you think that Sam Bankman-Fried will ever be let out of jail? And I ask that because my friends in Washington tell me there's already a lot of negotiation going on between his circle and people in Washington around the Trump administration to negotiate the price of a pardon.
Sam Bankman-Fried doesn't have any money. His parents are, living kind of almost hand to mouth. So they can't pay Trump for a pardon. So Sam Bankman-Fried has a 25-year sentence, which, because it's a federal sentence, is not eligible for parole. The only way he gets out is if the president pardons him. Sam's not the only one in jail from FTX. Ryan Salem, who was the CEO, Sam is in a medium security prison in Long Beach. Ryan Salem is in a minimum security prison in Maryland. Ryan Salem was a Republican who gave money to the Republican Party and who's friends with Donald Trump Jr. I think Ryan Salem will probably be pardoned. because I mean,
I don't doubt that, but yeah.
You want to bet?
Yeah, hey.
What would you like
we
to
can
bet?
take a bet. It's only because I'm hearing gossip, it's a $10 million prize.
Ryan Salem has that.
$10 million. Ryan has it, but Sam Bankman-Fried's got plenty of friends in high places around him.
Sam Bankman-Fried has no friends. As far as I can tell, he has. You tell me who Sam Bankman-Fried's friends are, because I don't know them. I mean, he's had his parents were beloved on the Stanford campus, and there are some admirable people who were their colleagues on the Stanford faculty who've stuck with them, including the current new head of the LSE, Larry Kramer, who bravely, because all the social pressure was to throw them under the bus. Nobody, so far as I can tell, with lots of resources is like cozying up to the Bankman-Frieds. He is toxic. He's radioactive. And Sam, of course, famously was like trying to pay Trump not to run for the presidency. I mean, this is one of the first things I learned from him. Is like there's a negotiation going on, and it's now at $5 billion. It's insane, right? I mean, it would never have worked. But he was so hostile to Trump that all his money was out there trying to defeat Trump. That's not something that's going to appeal to Trump. The only thing that would appeal to Trump is the person who sentenced Sam Bankman-Fried, the judge Lewis Kaplan, also was the judge in the E. Jean Carroll trial.
Yep.
And so, and the prosecutors who prosecuted Sam Bankman-Fried were the ones who resigned in protest when Trump tried to meddle with the Southern District of New York. So Trump might, in his weird way, think, oh, I can screw them by letting out people who they jailed. But I don't think that Trump feels any natural sympathy.
Okay, so we have the bet.
No, we had to bet something. I will bet you dinner.
Okay,
I will bet you dinner
that.
that Ryan Salem gets out before Sam Bankman-Fried with a pardon.
Okay, I'll take that.
Okay.
And then we can settle the city.
At any restaurant of our choice. Okay?
That could be expensive. You want to come to Cambridge?
No,
come to Cambridge.
Okay.
Okay, we have that. You've all heard it as witnesses. So how do you know, it's another question from the audience, a great question. How do you know that something is a Michael Lewis story?
I don't think of it that way.
But how do you know that you smell that it's going to be a great story? I mean,
So I pick up and drop stuff all the time. I don't know right away.
But do you run into somebody at a cocktail party and say, yes?
If Sam Bankman-Fried had not been, if that had not all collapsed, I didn't know how to do the book. I was sitting with all this stuff, and I didn't know how to make sense of it. That I've had several times material that I was marinating in magically give me a narrative. It always starts small. As small as I just met Sam Bankman-Fried and went for a walk with him. And after 2 hours, I saw that if I could get to all the places he'd been, there was a lot of material that I would like to know more about. And I didn't know what the book was, but I would figure that out along the way. I never say, oh, I'm going to write a book about X, sitting in my study. It's always, you have to go out and ask questions. So, example. Moneyball is kind of the cleanest example. It's like, the Oakland A's baseball team is in my backyard. I happen to be watching them on the television. I had the simple first idle curiosity was salaries were exploding in professional sports. Free agency had come to professional sports. The left fielder of the Oakland A's was being paid like $5 million a year all of a sudden, and the right fielder was still being paid $150,000. The first question I had was, is the right fielder pissed off when the left fielder screws up? Like, is there kind of class resentment going on within the team? So I started watching the money because it started to get interesting. And then it became clear as you were watching that, oh, the Yankees have just come to town. And the Yankees are spending 5 times more on their players than the A's. How can the A's win? Like, if the market's efficient, like, the Yankees just buy all the best players and they beat the A's all the time. And the A's were beating the Yankees. So how is that possible? At that point, I think I had to go ask somebody. And so it starts with a question. And the person to ask is the guy running the A's. If the answer had been, oh, I don't know, we're lucky, I wouldn't have gone anywhere. But when I get to Billy Beane, and he says, no one has come and asked me that question, and it's the best question. That's what I spend my life thinking about, is how we compete with fewer resources. And the answer is, the market is not efficient. People don't know how to value baseball players. People don't know how to value baseball strategies. That blew my mind. So then it's like, it's still not a book. It's still not a book. Can I tell you how it became a book? Because it was kind of funny. So it was like, what is this about exactly? And Sorry, my throat is a little scratchy. So I spent 3 months with them. Possibly nothing would come of it. That happens. Has happened a lot.
How often does it happen? I mean, what's the ratio of
hits
digging?
Misses.
Well, I was going to say digging to actual hitting gold. Is it like 3 to 1, 10 to 1?
10 to 1.
10 to 1.
But 10, most of the time it's a week. It's not 3 months. This time it was just getting more and more interesting. And then one day, I was getting deeper and deeper into the organization and embedding myself. But the managers, the general manager, was basically running a science experiment with baseball players. He didn't tell the players about what the experiment was. He told me not to. He said it would just confuse them. Don't tell the players anything. But the players are all curious. Like, it was a weird team. So I was getting to know the players because the players, I could explain to them like why they were playing first base, and no one had. And so I was interviewing the players, getting their view of what was going on. And I was sitting in the Oakland A's clubhouse, and it was after a game, and the players were all coming out of the showers. It was the first time I'd seen the team naked, and it was just an appalling sight. They were not. The bodies did not look like the bodies of professional athletes. They were like fat ankles. Everybody had a beer belly. I went to the front office and I said, weird observation. If you line the naked bodies of your team up against a wall and asked anybody what they did for a living, people would never guess they were professional athletes. They would think like, I don't know, accountants. And the guy, the number 2 in the A's front office said, this is actually important. He said, when we're looking at players who we think are undervalued, we always ask, why are they undervalued? Why can we get them cheaply? Their statistics tell us they're really good, but why would the market not see their value? And he said, one of the big reasons is how they look. If they don't look right, the market doesn't see it. And the reverse was also true. The athlete was handsome, fit, fast, but was actually not very good, the market would overvalue them. And I went home and I thought, I wrote an email to my publisher, and I said, this is going to weird you out, but I'm going to write a book about baseball. And what it animated me was this idea that, like, forget they're baseball players. I think of them as just corporate employees. They've been doing the same job for 100 years.
Yeah.
They have 1 million people watching them every time they do it. They have statistics attached to every move they make on the job. If these people can be misvalued because of how they look, who can't be? At that moment, it became a kind of universal story. And that happens with a lot.
Right.
When I get to that, it's like, oh, okay, this is worth doing.
And so you have the aha moment.
I don't know if you write books. I get to the point, you tell me if you feel this way. I feel I have to delude myself, at least, to the point. I have to get to the body of material, to a place in my head where I feel I have an obligation to write it because it's so good, and I have a privileged relationship.
Well, you have to kind of fall in love with the quest and the person, not the person, but the quest and the question.
The
story. The question, above all else, in the story.
With the story.
Yeah.
And so it takes a while to find, sometimes takes a while to find that affection for the story.
And then you suddenly go bing. We're going to go into the audience now for questions, so get ready to raise your hands. We're going to have a roving mic or two, I think, around in the audience, but just as you're preparing to raise your hands, I'm going to ask one more question from the online audience who've been watching, and hello to everyone watching online, which is, you said it in a book that civil servants have been, quotes, disabled, which is the polite way for rendered incompetent or fired. And the book, The Fifth Risk, made it very clear how dangerous it was to take them away. So what keeps you awake at night in terms of the next big ticking time bomb of risks that's happened because of Doge?
You mean you want me to predict?
Yeah, I want to predict, not describe, but predict.
You know, I tell you something, I get asked to predict the future all the time. It's not what I do. I feel that my job is to come in after the battle was fought and shoot the wounded. It isn't really to predict where the battle.
So you describe, not prescribe, or
where
predict.
Where the battle is. I just don't think it isn't. I'm not being modest here. I don't think anybody can do it. And when I hear people telling me about the future, I instantly think fraud. You're a fraud, or you're dumb. You don't know. You don't know how impossible that is. Especially political futures. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just too complicated.
Right.
Anything can happen.
Well, let's hope
I happen to know that Ryan Salem might actually get out, so I just
we have the bet.
I had inside information.
Okay.
Well, that's different. I wasn't that's not a fair prediction. But so I think kind of the point of this is that there are so many things that could go really wrong that you have no idea. Who knows what it's going to be? I mean, we'll wake up tomorrow and we'll say, why didn't we think of that one? It won't be a pandemic. It won't be a nuclear bomb going off. It won't be obvious things that are salient.
Well,
it'll be something else. And so the food supply, who knows, the water supply, who knows what it is. And so I don't, but I would say, if you want me to, I'll change the question a little bit. Like, what am I watching? And thinking maybe there's material there coming down the pike. I'm watching our financial system. And not the financial system, the government finances. Been watching it for a long time. That we seem incapable as a society of grappling with our finances in an honest way. And we've been granted the privilege of not having to do it. The deficit's been spinning out of control, and it's not even a topic in a presidential campaign.
Yep.
Donald Trump pretends that he's interested in it, and that's why he's bringing Elon Musk in. Elon Musk makes no dent at all in government spending, and Donald Trump at the same time presents a bill that's going to inflate the deficit by
beautiful bill.
$2.3 trillion.
Yep, adding another on top of 36 trillion and all that. Yes.
Yes. So
painful. Okay.
The financial crisis, the 2008 financial crisis, was resolvable because there was a grown-up that could walk into the room and calm everybody down. The grown-up was the government. They could take the risk. They were a credible grown-up. What happens if the grown-up is no longer the grown-up? What if the grown-up is the source of the problem? What happens if U.S. Treasuries are no longer a riskless asset? Like, they're a really risky asset.
Well, there are a lot of investors already asking that question.
And
I've been away.
Yeah. So there's a boring story where what it does is it just jacks up interest rates a bit, and it raises the cost of capital a bit, and it slows economic growth a bit. But there's a vicious cycle too, where where interest rates go up, and I
write for the Financial Times. I don't think that's boring.
Okay. Well, I think I'm watching that. I think that's
okay. So the next book is going to be about the thrills of the Treasury Management Department.
Joke.
Yeah, I mean those auctions, they're wild. Bond auctions, right? We better get some audience questions in. Who would like to raise their hands, and do wave it quite vigorously because it's quite hard to see. Okay, I've got one hand back there that gets prizes for waving extra hard. We'll start over there and then we'll come towards the middle.
Gillian, I actually know you from when I was an associate and used to have conversations with a partner that I used to work with. But I'm Monica Gogner. I'm a partner at Squire Patton Boggs. Michael, I loved your question about how in the corporate world, if you don't fit in, then, people start to doubt you. I don't fit in. I'm a brown woman who's a partner in financial services. How do you think I should fit in?
I'm looking at you, Michael.
I don't know what to do with that exactly, except that an extension of this observation that was at the heart of the Moneyball story, that people who don't fit the stereotype might be undervalued, was that the Oakland A's front office, they were in a separate life. They were investors in the stock market. They had a little money and they were interested in investing. And they took the view that they saw that like 80% of American CEOs, the CEOs of America's biggest companies, were like white guys who were 6'2" or bigger. And they refused to invest in companies run by white guys who were 6'2" or bigger because they took the view that those are the equivalent of the baseball players who just look good. They aren't good. And if they could find a brown woman who was 5'6", who was running a company, they wanted to invest there. So I can't answer your question. Your question is unanswerable to me. But I would make the argument wherever to people around you, that wherever you are, that, hey, if I'm here, it's because I'm good, you know?
Well, if it works for baseball, it can work in the corporate world as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. We've got a question, we've got a couple of questions out there. We've got the mics over there. We've got the gentleman in the, I think it's second or third row, with a white and blue shirt there.
Thank you. Fascinating to hear from you, Michael. Thank you. And I actually own a restaurant in Cambridge, so if you want to take the bet up.
Yeah, exactly. So when you lose...
You're very welcome.
What's the name of the restaurant?
Ancient Shepherds.
Ancient Checkers?
Shepherds.
Shepherds, Ancient Shepherds.
Right, top that one.
But my question, so you talked about the importance of character and emotion. What does automation and AI do to the future of your kind of books?
Could ChatGPT write your books?
No. It doesn't.
Not yet?
No, it doesn't. Well, no, I mean, so this is funny. I've not taken on AI as a subject, but I was flirting with it 18 months ago. And I went and had dinner with Sam Altman at his house. I wanted to talk to him about Sam Bankman-Fried, but he was interesting for other reasons, obviously. And he, at the time, this is the head of OpenAI, probably the most influential person in AI right now.
Don't tell Elon Musk.
Yeah, he was dealing with the problem of lots of journalists wanted to write his biography, and he didn't really want it written, but he said, if I've got it, it'd be the easiest thing would be just have one of these people do it so everybody else goes away. Who should do it? And I said to him, like, if you have confidence in your machine, your machine should do it, right? Why you say this thing's so smart, why are you having a person write your biography? And he looked at me and said, it's not that smart. Couldn't do it. He said, but it might one day be that smart. Like he said, 18 months, 2 years. We're around the time where he said it would be that smart. And so I proposed to him, and he said maybe, and I've heard from him since, and it's still a maybe, that we toss all the ingredients of his biography into his machine, and we let it write the story of Sam Altman, and I do my own story alongside it. I go do my reporting, I go learn my things, and I'll be learning a lot of things that aren't being poured into the machine, and that's why they can't write a book. Mm-hmm. They only know what's on, whether you can Google. They only know what's out there. And we compare. And I was interested in, the book that interests me is, so it's not just the biography of Sam Altman, it's using the biography of Sam Altman to write the biography to study the mind of the machine, like what it does well and what it doesn't do well. And I have done things with ChatGPT like, write me the first chapter of a Michael Lewis book about Sam Bankman-Fried. And it's so bad. It's just so bad. It's just bad. It's weirdly bad. I'd like to remain skeptical about AI because you're not supposed to. That if you say that, oh, really, it's overblown, people dismiss you. But there are an awful lot of financial interests in pumping it up, right? So there's not a whole lot of interest in undermining it. No one has really explained to me, even Sam Bankman-Fried and the people who were supposedly terrified of AI, they couldn't actually walk me through a plausible scenario where AI came to eat me in the middle of the night. And maybe it will, I don't know. So what the future is, I don't know. I know what the present is that it's not that interesting a mind. So it is, and it could do some tasks. I'd be willing to bet that it's really good at boring jobs, that it will make lots of boring jobs not necessary. And that's probably a good thing, you know? Who wants to do the boring jobs?
So did you take a bet with Sam?
Sam Altman?
Yeah. No. As to whose book would be better, ChatGPT or yours?
Oh, I don't think he would want to make that bet. I still don't even know, really. I don't think he was sort of, his feeling was we couldn't do it now because it would be so embarrassing. He said, like, in 2 years, it won't be embarrassing.
Well, we'll have to get you back at the sea. Okay, we've got a question over there, over in the front row in the corner.
Thank you very much. I've worked in UK local government for 50 years.
There we go.
actually, just wondering about how many people in the room have worked in government? Okay, not that many, actually. Wow. I thought it'd be more.
When we did this in Washington, D.C., every hand went up.
Well, it was probably like a group therapy session.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Public spending as a percentage of GDP in the UK was 32% in 2000 and went up to 36% by the time we got to 2024. Central government over that period experienced austerity. Local government, which I worked for, experienced real cuts. Every single chief executive that I've ever worked for has told me that there must never be a year without revenue cuts in order to drive productivity. I'd like to ask the storyteller and the economist in front of us what their comments are on that.
He's a talent.
No, you go. You go. You're the economist.
No, you go first.
Well, this is
I think people are more interested in the story than they are
we're in this vicious,
GDP.
I don't know about your country. In our country, we're in this vicious cycle of underinvestment in the public sector, which leads the public sector to seem ineffective, which causes even less interest, which leads to even less interest in investing in the public sector. And it's distressing. And when you start to see in my country the statistics, I mean, here's one that will just blow you away. In like information technology in the federal government, it's something like 70% of the workers in IT are 60 years old or over. 5% are 30 years old or younger. In other words, the people who know how to use their phone are not we're not recruiting the talent to refresh the government. And you can find that kind of story across the government because of underinvestment. And it's, I mean, I felt, when I asked myself, like, why is this happening? In my country, anyway, it feels like it's a luxury. Like we can afford for our government to be kind of shitty because we have not faced real existential risks for a while. The pandemic didn't quite do it. But that at some point, the government's going to become so inept that something really horrible is going to happen and people will wake up. And I just don't know what it is that will force us to wake up.
Absolutely. I'll simply say one of the many tragedies around Doge is that the group that Elon Musk went into was actually the digital services part of the government with a reform mandate. And they'd been trying for years to put digitization into the American government, and they need it very badly to raise productivity and to actually do more effectively, and actually let the humans in government do their job more effectively as well. So Elon Musk went in there, but of course did anything other than digitize the government, which is probably the one thing he's actually qualified to advise on, sadly. But anyway, another question. Let me try and see all the hands. Okay. Okay, I can see an ultra keen person right at the very back, again, who gets prizes for being super keen. Okay.
Hi, my name is Shayna Gallagher. I am one of the many refugees of the American political system. I take no credit for our current situation. I was curious to hear, Michael, your response to the question about why is there such a lack of belief and enthusiasm for government in the U.S. Based on my experience, I feel very strongly that has a lot to do with money in electoral politics. There's certainly underfunding in actual government, but our electoral system is wildly expensive and tends to be billions and billions every cycle. So I'm curious the degree to which you think that disconnect between the money and the ultra-wealthy donors and their sway over our members of government compared to what working people expect their elected representatives to deliver for them, how much you attribute the dysfunction in government to that money in electoral politics, and if you'd agree, what you think we can do to fix it.
So,
two small questions.
What's that?
Two small questions.
I'm trying to understand the question.
The question is,
frame it for me. Is
the problem with the lack of respect for government down to the fact that the democracy has been subverted by pork and by political donors controlling everything? It's all about the money.
Well, it's more than that. So just take the subject of government service being appealing to young people. The opportunity cost of going to work for government instead of Wall Street or the tech sector has gone through the roof in the last few decades. So right there, it's less glamorous because relative to a private sector that is offering young people outsized rewards. So that's one thing. I think that the money, we are a money culture. You know, we're such a money culture that we let the richest man in the world, who knew absolutely nothing about the government, go into the government and muck around with it without asking him too many questions about what he was doing, because we assume because he's rich he must be smart. And so the absence of money, monetary rewards in government, that's one thing, I think. Are rich people using their influence to actively subvert the government? Yes, totally. I mean, where I've seen it personally is in the financial sector. Like, I wrote a book called Flash Boys about a problem in the stock market that arose when it was automated. I've heard from 3 subsequent SEC chairmen that it is a problem and they want to fix it. They get into the job, and billionaires who run high-frequency trading firms prevent them from doing it. I mean, simple example. I mean, I'm sure that happens across the regulatory infrastructure, that money speaks. So, yeah, totally, in a shocking way. So, yeah. But that's a little different from why people hate the government. I mean, maybe there's a whole separate story there that, well, the Republican Party, funded by the rich, has taken the view that if you can undermine this, it'll be good for the rich. Yeah.
Well, the country was founded by people who are fleeing government.
What's that?
The country was founded by people who are fleeing
That's
government.
That's true too. We're an unruly country. We're not an easy place to govern. It's not in our DNA. But anyway.
Right. We got a question right down the front. I think in the 3rd row.
Fascinating talk. Thank you. You've been talking about federal civil servants. Is it better or worse at the level of the states and the cities?
I think it depends on where you are. The expert class in the federal government is I think awesome in a way that you don't find at the state and local level. The problems are just more interesting to people. I mean, I think it's probably true that the smaller the enterprise, the better it's governed. Generally, I don't know. I have not actually reported in state and local government. I kind of doubt they're Chris Mark-like characters in state and local government.
Well, you don't know yet. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, it's just like what attracts him to the federal government is that the federal government is this portfolio of incredibly interesting big problems.
Yeah.
So talent is attracted to that.
What do you want to do next, by the way? What's your next book?
I'm going back to follow the Doge tornado and just try to understand the effects of what they've done. And I don't know if maybe that's a book, maybe that's not. I have to get into it a little more deeply. I can't. What I've actually been doing the last 2 months is writing a play.
Wow.
And so it's a little different.
What is that about?
I can't tell you. So I feel badly that I can't tell you.
And you can't tell us because you're tortured by writing.
No. I actually have a contract with a theater to do this thing. I'm not supposed to talk about it. Okay. So that's what I've been working on.
Well, that's called narrative suspense, and it's guaranteed to
keep
everyone watching you.
I find with the books, just generally, that it's better not to talk about them until they're written. That if you talk about them, you lose interest in them. I don't know. Do you not find that? I feel like what I'm working on now is the last thing I want to talk about.
Yeah. No, I can understand that completely. It's part of the, right. I'm going to take the question there in the middle, over there. I can see we've only got a few more minutes left, so I'm going to have to disappoint a lot of you, I'm afraid.
Hello. My name is Nabil Shuba. I work on an AI company. My question is that, do you agree with Tolstoy in his book, War and Peace, where he said, history doesn't depend on people? This means that Obama rule or Trump at the end is the same thing. They are going to do the same thing. And so the only difference is the style.
Oh, right. So it's not about characters, it's
Exactly,
about
yes.
events.
So you have Obama or you have Trump on the top of the country. The only change that you will see is the style, how they rule. But the
So
end result
basically
is
the
the same.
structure.
I guess I don't.
You like people.
I like people, but it's funny you say this. It is true that we overrate character and underrate situation. Like the same person will be different in two different situations. That the situations are powerful. But it's not true that like history is personality independent. Like it's just going to go wherever it goes, no matter what. There are huge accidents that lead to history. Danny Kahneman used to say, who wrote a book about the psychologist, that if you want to change history, just reimagine Hitler being born a girl. It's just you don't get the same outcomes.
Absolutely.
And it's a 50-50 shot.
Yeah. Right, we get one last question right at the very back, I can see. And let's hope it is a great one.
Hello.
I hope it's just one. It's one I can answer.
Yeah, no pressure.
Hello, my name is Victor Pasinog. I'm just a curious high schooler. About what you were saying about American distrust of government, do you think that's because of cultural reasons as well? For example, the right to bear arms was created, for people to defend against the oppressive government.
Was it? I mean, so it is true that it is in our bloodstream to be suspicious of authority. So it is cultural. But it's not, we're not incapable of governing ourselves. I mean, so we are incapable now of governing ourselves. We have not historically been incapable of governing ourselves. This is an acute moment. So unless you think the culture has changed in some way, this is not a satisfying answer to the question.
Right.
If the implication is Americans will never govern themselves properly because it's like in the founding of the country's, the spirit of the country, that I don't buy that. I don't think we're incapable of governing ourselves. We're just incapable of governing ourselves now.
So would you go and work for government?
I'm more of a decorative object. I just don't think of myself as useful. But if there was a project of like telling the government story, a WPA project, like one of those projects where go in with a team of writers and explain the government to the American people, I could do that. Would I want to run anything in the government? No, I don't. No, my attention span is not good enough to run anything. So I just don't think I'd be any good at it. But if there were some role that seemed useful, sure, absolutely.
Well, I think that your inbox may be flooded tomorrow by that. I hope someone from the American government is listening.
The last thing the Trump administration wants is for someone to go in and tell the story of the American government right now. There may come a time when this enterprise needs to be, the people are willing to have the enterprise explained to them. That might be useful.
Right. Well, we are sadly out of time. It's been an amazing conversation. I mean, I've taken away sort of 3 key points, I guess. One is that you have done an extraordinary act of public service by telling the story of real people in the government who, as you say, do not often get their stories told, let alone turned into potential movies. So the fact you've done it is fantastic. Secondly, if there was ever a moment in history when we needed to have the movie about the bureaucrat, it's right now. It really is right now. And thirdly, I guess the extraordinary thing that you found in your whole long career, all the way from being on Wall Street with live poker, through to Moneyball, through to The Big Short, all of that, is at the end of the day, whatever the big issues, whatever the dramas, we are all human, and it's human stories that unite us all. So, very best of luck with your next story. Very best of luck with your next hidden play, which we're all now, of course, excited to see. And I look forward to seeing you in Cambridge next when I win my bet. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.